Good afternoon, viewers. Welcome to ETAuto. Now, we are on the cusp of a brave new era of electric mobility, which will be key to our fight against climate change. Now, the changes that EVs will usher in will be widespread. It will not just be restricted to tailpipe emissions or how we curb use of fossil fuel, but also in the way we run our vehicles, how we manage them, how we sell them, finance or insure them, or even service them. Now, over the next 1 hour in this special panel discussion as part of our annual Automotive Retail Forum 2022, we will be discussing all of this in some detail. And we are joined by three very eminent personalities of this industry. Let me welcome Mr. Naveen Munjal. He needs no introduction. He's the Managing Director of Hero Electric, India's largest electric two-wheeler company. He will give us the perspective of how things have been for electric two-wheelers. As we know, there's been a strong tailwind for them, and it looks like we are very close to inflection point now. We are also joined by Mr. Gaurav Gupta. He's the Senior Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer at MG Motor. He will be representing the four-wheeler perspective. As we know, MG Motor is one of the companies that brought in an electric vehicle very early into the innings, which is very unlikely because some of the other companies are still dilly-dallying, and they have other new products also in the pipeline. So we would love to know more about that. So thank you for joining us. To represent the dealer fraternity, we have Dr. Shyam Shetty from Bangalore. He has obviously exposure to so many companies that I will probably miss out on a few if I start doing that. So let me just say that he brings in an experience both from the passenger vehicles, two-wheelers, commercial vehicles, and also now he is a dealer with Ether Energy. So he also has experience of electric vehicles, and he himself is an electric warrior, as we say. He's famous for that in the dealer fraternity. So welcome, sir. We are just so stoked to have all of you. To set the ball rolling, Mr. Munjal, I'll come to you. Now, when you started in 2007, electric vehicles wasn't cool. Not anybody was looking at electric vehicles. The market wasn't ready. There were not too many players, and yet you took the bait. And so to say, you bore the brunt of the lack of awareness, the lack of any kind of SOPs or incentives. And now we are in a position where everybody seems to be in the market. They all want some piece of the action. So give us a perspective of how much has changed, and what have you seen over the last 15 years of your own journey? Where do we stand right now?
Thank you, Sumant. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure being here today. Thank you for having me. So it's been a very interesting journey. Actually, we started way back in 2000, 2001, experimenting with electric bicycles at that point of time. The whole concept was to make life easier for a commuter when he's got a vehicle. And at that point, we were targeting a guy who was using a bicycle or a moped or a motorcycle. And what was going to be his automotive journey? How does he transition? Very quickly, we realized that market is not quite the same. The market is going to be very, very different. And this business is going to involve a lot of push from our side. So what we did actually is in 2003, we were testing out lithium-ion batteries at that point, which were extremely expensive. And then in 2007, I realized that this business is going to involve not just 100% push, but it's going to be a 500% push from our side. So we have to create a completely separate company, separate ecosystem, separate supply chain, and a separate dealer network. And that dealer network does nothing else but lives, breathes, eats electric. And that's exactly what we've been doing for the past 15 odd years. Now, it was very, very challenging at that point of time. In 2008, we also established the EV Association, SMEV. Very, very challenging times, because it was very difficult for us to actually convince dealers to actually sign on at that point of time. We had to beg and plead them. In the initial time, we also had to give them credit, etc., which we stopped doing after a while, but just to get them on board. So we were getting, at that point, the quality of dealers that we were getting, etc., were committed, but not experienced enough. So there was a lot of handholding that was to be done at that point. There was a lot of training of the dealers. And one of the factors that we very quickly had to tell our dealers and teach our dealers is not to overcommit, or not to tell the customer something which is not completely accurate. For example, at that point, these were all lead acid battery vehicles. I'm talking about 15 years back. And there was a certain life of the vehicle, of the battery. There was a certain this thing. So we had to basically tell them to tone down the expectations of the customer when it came to this thing. And the customer expectations, if they were toned down and the experience was better than that, and that was a great thing. And that's exactly how we kept on building the industry from there. Over the next couple of years, then we introduced lithium-ion batteries. At that point, again, they were quite expensive. When we introduced it, they were about $400 a kilowatt hour, which is now about $120, $130 a kilowatt hour. So what we did is we gave, again, the option to the customer in order to switch from a lead to a lithium. On the same vehicle, you could either have a lead-acid vehicle battery or a lithium-ion. Our point in that was that, we attract the customer into the dealership. Once he's in the dealership, we try the conversion process of switching him to a electric. In a lot of markets, it worked, but in a lot of markets, it didn't work in the same manner. While all of this was happening, we were very, very conscious of the fact that, these dealers have entrusted their faith on us. They've actually taken our dealership. This is exclusive. They're not doing anything else. There's no other form of revenue. So they have to make money before the company. And this used to be quite interesting. A couple of years back, we were doing a dealer conference. This is not too far back. And earlier, whenever we used to ask the dealers, who's making money, most or not making money, everybody would raise their hands. There would be 2, 3 of them who said that, we are the ones making money, and we would call them to the stage and they would describe how they were making money, what is it that they were doing right, etc. A couple of years back, we had the same conference, the same number of dealers. And this time when I asked that who's making money or who's not making money, the number of hands raised for making money were huge. And so I had to ask that who's not making money, and there were just a very few of them. So basically, these are the guys who had joined us recently. Now and so there were very few hands which were raised in the recent past. So what's happened, we've got a large number of vehicles on the road in the last 15 odd years. We've got in excess of 1 lakh vehicles that are coming back in for replacement, etc. Dealers are making substantial amount of money. The business model is very different now versus what a IC business model is. Here, the revenue is from sales. It's not so much from service revenue. And that's a huge transition. Now we have a challenge on our hands where we've got more and more people asking us for dealerships than what we are able to actually take out, because we have a capacity constraint. We have a constraint of how much we can deliver. So in the last few months, we've actually slowed down the dealership opening process. We've slowed down the process of selling even online. But what we've done in the interim is training the roadside mechanics to fix the electric vehicles. So we've already trained about 8,000 of them. The idea is to take that up to about 25,000 in the next couple of years. And you create that ecosystem. So while we may have slowed down the sales, we've actually sped up the service part of it, because now more and more vehicles are going to come back in for servicing, parts replacement, etc. So very interesting times. I've not seen this level of transition happening at all in the last 15 odd years, what I'm seeing in the past 1 year or so. And I believe it's only going to accelerate from here. As we call it, the hockey stick growth has already started. And the amount of speed at which we are going to see this transition happening is going to surpass anybody's expectations. So
your early bet is paying off. You can probably relax a bit and now enjoy the fruits of your labor, which at that point in time, very few were actually convinced that electric mobility is here to stay, or that it will become a reality so soon. And it looks like now it is right in front of us. It's a sea change. And it's very, in a way, uncommon to hear a manufacturer saying, don't overpromise, because generally dealers are taught that, promise the moon, just convince the customer, just make your deal. And here is a manufacturer who is saying that let's not overpromise, because it's not good for the long run. And also the fact that now you are in a position where you have to say sorry to dealers versus the time when you were begging that please invest, please have faith in us, and let's start the electric journey. So very interesting. Mr. Gupta, I'll come to you. Now, one of the main challenges that anybody faces, and this is the question that even we are getting asked almost on a daily basis, is that what about residual and resale value of any electric vehicle? Now, it is even more important for passenger vehicles, because an electric two-wheeler may stay with that person for longer, or it may or may not, who knows, but a vehicle definitely changes hands. And a battery, our experience with lithium-ion batteries is that it degrades over time. Now, I know for a fact that when you launched the ZS, you brought in some very interesting buyback schemes. You also had subscription models. Tell us something about this. That is, how big a challenge was this? That did you know that residual value will be something that buyers would be scared of, and so you expressly thought that you should have some schemes which make them a little more assured about?
Thanks, Sumant, and thanks for inviting me to be part of the panel. And taking cue from what Naveen just mentioned, I think the momentum is on. I think all these things have a tipping point, and I think the overall environment is so buzzing with EVs today. Whether it is the government support using its PLI programs, advanced cell chemistry, the state's progressions towards helping adoption of EVs by both private as well as commercial usage, the overall development in the product in the component industry. So everywhere you can see the buzzword is right now EV. And I must I want to just add that 2017 is when we started to work on our first EV, and we were, like you had said, we brought it in 2019. And for us, frankly, Sumant, it's not about just a tokenism about bringing in a car. Overall as a company, we are very much geared towards sustainability and green. So whether it is a wind solar hybrid energy in our plant recently, which we talked about as being the first passenger car company, or looking at how to give consumer an overall confidence of jumping towards an EV, which is about 3 years ago, and obviously moving forward. And that is where the entire ecosystem starts to build up, whether it is for recycling of batteries or the resale value of the cars. Now in India, we know that whether it is the ICE engine or any product for that matter, we do look at resale value as one of the key parameters of our buying process, right? So right when we brought in the first Hector also in 2019, we were able to provide a back-end support of a 60% buyback at the end of 3 years, which was again an industry first at that point in time. I'm happy to say that the overall response has been good, and the MG brand as such, the Hector so far, has really held up to be amongst the best in the segment for resale value. Now coming to when we were bringing in the electric vehicle, like you mentioned, we knew that consumers as well as stakeholders in the industry, insurance partners, etc., would also have the same questions about what's going to happen after 3, 5, 7, 8 years. So a lot of time, we have spent in actually educating as well. So while we did have a 50% buyback at the end of 3 years, I must say that the overall industry is performing, for us at least, it's performing much better right now. There are not many people who are putting up their vehicles, out there in the market, because frankly, while they've enjoyed driving, the EV vehicles actually are able to perform and outlast its life compared to other vehicles. Why is that? One, the overall wear and tear is less. Moving parts are less. The battery per se has a very, very long shelf life. So while you talked about degradation, I must share that, at the end of 8 years or 10 years, the battery still has enough juice in it to be able to serve your purpose. And the degradation is in terms of, 1 or 2% over an annum, which is hardly anything when you look at an 8-year span. So for example, if a battery is able to provide, in our case, let's say a 419 kilometers on a single charge, even if you take a 1-2% degradation over 8 years, it still has enough support, enough juice in it to be able to provide you for even intra-city movement as well. So the vehicle is, I would say that EV actually are able to last much, much longer. And that is what is driving the confidence also in terms of overall adoption of EVs. So one, of course, cost of ownership is coming down. And in fact, if you see, like you talked about the gasoline prices in the country and diesel as well, that is also helping for adoption of EVs, number one, because in a matter of 3 years, your EV, we've done the maths. The ZS EV at about 25 lakh rupees compared to other ICE vehicles in the range of 15 or 20 odd lakh rupees. Within a matter of 2.5, 3 years, you're able to actually start seeing cost advantages. Second, on a residual value perspective, because you have less wear and tear, there is more confidence coming in as well to be able to hold the EVs for longer. So you have to make sure that you are backing up with great product and the best technology, which is currently available on batteries, which will help you to last longer.
Right. So basically, it's a perception issue. In the sense that even in ICE vehicles, the vehicle does degrade. The engine doesn't remain the same as when it is new. The chassis also undergoes a lot of wear and tear. The suspension may need a lot of redoing. But maybe we are overthinking on EVs a little bit because our experience might not be as good with our mobile phones. But an EV battery is a completely different animal, and the battery management system is so much more sophisticated in a vehicle as compared to a smartphone. So it's an interesting point. Dr. Shetty, I will want to bring you in here because you can give us the real on-ground reality of what is happening to dealers. You have both so many OEMs that you cater to, from Honda and Mercedes, Ashok Leyland, Suzuki motorcycles, and now you also have Ather. How different is the consumer? Is he the same? Does he have the same level of awareness, the same level of knowledge when he walks into a showroom for an EV versus an ICE vehicle? And is the dealer's role again the same, or is it a little more proactive when it comes to EV dealerships?
Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for calling me on for the EV panel discussion today. EVs have ushered in a new ecosystem. Consumers are shifting to EVs due to disruptive economic advantage and cost of operation. I would say sometimes 5x to 10x cheaper to run EVs than ICE scooters. The maintenance cost of EVs will be much lower. Basically, there are only two moving parts, the motor and the transmission, versus multiple moving parts in ICE engine vehicles. So nothing really to repair in an EV, at least for the first 50,000 kilometers. The absence of the intake, cooling, ignition, lubrication, exhaust systems means no consumables. So no spares, no replacement, no tuning, cheaper to maintain EVs than the ICE vehicles. The next one is coming to manpower. So we got to retrain all our manpower because today they are geared up to troubleshooting on IC engines. We got to transform and train them to learn about basic electronics and power electronics. We've been retraining manpower for maintenance of motors, connectors, cradle controller cards, battery management systems, regenerative braking systems, and of course, software. The entry barriers are much lower than the IC engine business. Many more manufacturers with wider choices, both local and regional and national brands have come in. There are about 145 manufacturers manufacturing different types of EVs in this country. I see, like Naveen ji said in his opening statement, the income for an IC engine dealer today is from sales, parts, workshop maintenance, insurance, and finance and used vehicle business. Okay, the sales part will continue to be there. The income from parts, lubrication, as well as repairs will drastically come down, maybe by 50 to 60% or even more. And all I'm talking of two-wheelers, a lot of them are plastic parts. Okay, there are a lot of child parts. We just remove the panel and put it in. And most of the insurance companies are giving zero-dip policies. So therefore, very little repairs on that. So the repairs on a EV that we have seen in the last 9 months that we've been dealers is very, very low when compared to an IC engine. The skill levels set to sell an EV is very different than that from an IC engine. It's a journey. You got to take him through, it's like an Apple store. You show him how the product works. When you walk into an Apple store, the sales guy talks more about technology and how it works and how is it going to be beneficial, the total cost of operation, etc. That's what is happening in the EV business. And to my surprise, there are young people, middle-aged people, as well as old people coming and buying EVs. Like Naveen ji said, even in Ather, we have a waiting list of 6 months today, because that's the demand for EVs. And to another question that you raised is, there's been a drop in the IC engine vehicles versus the EV vehicles. After the BS6 was introduced, every 2 months, 3 months, two-wheeler manufacturers have been increasing prices. That is because of input costs going up. The government subsidies, the FAME subsidy, has helped us to maintain the price and to sell these vehicles. So we have the same set of customers, young or middle-aged or old people coming in, but one is they're very concerned about the environment with the global warming crisis. And second thing is they feel that it's far cheaper and easier to maintain when compared to an IC engine. I hope I've answered all your questions.
Yes, you have. You mentioned that people are concerned about environment, and also now it is saving money. So it's a win-win, because I think only environment, and as Mr. Munjal can also testify, it does not really make the deal for a consumer unless there is something to do with his pocket. So now that pocket is pinching when you buy or when you go to refuel a petrol two-wheeler, and if you can recharge your vehicle, just like your mobile phone at home, then it is the cheapest. Maybe 1 rupees per kilometer is what you end up, and it could be as high as 6 rupees or 7 rupees for a petrol. So it's a definite case of economics working in favor of EVs. Mr. Munjal, I'll come to you, and I have a question on, you have invested in the brick and mortar kind of dealerships over these years, almost the same sort of setup as any other two-wheeler OEM has. There are new models being tried out now, multi-branded showrooms. There is also some, like Ola is trying to do a direct to doorstep kind of a model where you don't need dealerships at all. You can deliver the vehicles direct to your home. You can be serviced at your doorstep. So many different models are being tried out. What is your take on this? Are dealerships becoming redundant, especially in the EV era, or do they have a role to play?
So our belief is that there is always, at least in the near to medium future, there is always going to be requirement of a touch and feel for a customer. This category is a very, very new category. Majority of the people have not even tried out a vehicle. They've not even seen a vehicle. They may be aware of it because of all the noise that's been created in the last couple of years, but they've not tried it out. So, when this whole COVID thing, let me give you an example. When this whole COVID thing began in 2020 in March, within the first week of COVID lockdowns, we were back to business in terms of doing it in some other form. So that was a great opportunity for us. We were always trying to sell online while we were building a dealer network. So I'm a great propagator, I'm a great believer that while the physical network is very, very important for the touch and feel and for people to try out the vehicles, the virtual network is also, the digital network is also very, very important. Now, what we did at that point is start training up the dealers on how to handle digital sales. So while we even sell online sales, while we do online business, we route it through the dealer, because end of the day, as I was saying earlier, we want the dealers to make money. End of the day, the dealer is the one who's going to be maintaining the vehicle. There will be, as Dr. Shetty was saying, this requires less maintenance, but it's not no maintenance. You will still have breakdowns, you will have batteries need to be replaced, and you will have accidents and parts need to be replaced, etc. And that is where the dealer's role comes into play in a very, very meaningful manner. So while this whole lockdown was on, the national lockdown, we actually were doing these webinars with our potential customers, just the way that we are doing right now, where we had hundreds of people sitting on the other side and asking us questions about electric, all kinds of questions from resale value to finance, etc. And one of the big factors that came out is that we've heard about it, but we've not tried out an electric vehicle. How can we buy a vehicle so expensive when we've not seen or touched or felt or tried it out? So what we did is we said, okay, we deliver the vehicles to you. You try it out for 3 days. If you don't like it, you return it back to us, no questions asked. And that shot up our sales of online sales by 15x at that point of time over the previous year without any returns coming in at all. So what I believe is going to happen is it's not either left or a right. There's going to be a path which is there. Dealerships will still exist, even in the midterm. Long term, 10 years, 15 years from now, once there's enough traction, I don't know how the model is going to pan out, but I believe that dealerships are going to remain because people are want to go and have a option of picking up different vehicles in a dealership as you have more and more models, seeing the color in person, taking a decision, having the flexibility of taking a vehicle into a dealership for servicing rather than waiting for somebody to come. You're sitting at home and waiting for somebody to come. So while that's going to be a very, very, very important factor, the touch and feel. In fact, if I ask all of you right now, would you order a vehicle online and just have it delivered to you? I'm yet to come across too many people who would say that, yes, we would do that. On that touch vehicles. And then, of course, the service is going to be a critical factor. ease of service, ease of taking it somewhere to get your vehicle service. That's going to be a very important factor. So for us, it's going to be a hybrid model, and that's what we are pushing forward, both online and offline. Even when we go sell online, we route it through the dealer. So the dealer actually has a role to play even in online sales.
Yeah, we are just about getting used to ordering burgers and household groceries online. I think vehicles are a bridge too far right now. But you rightly mentioned it's a hybrid world we are living in. It will be a mix of both, because now we are sometimes working from office, sometimes working at home. So it's all hybrid. Hybrid is probably the era right now, even though not for hybrid vehicles, but hybrid lifestyle. Probably that is how it is. Gaurav, I'd like to bring you in here. How important is the dealer in the EV era, especially for passenger vehicles? If touch and feel is so important for two-wheelers, I would assume touch and feel is probably even more important for passenger vehicles, because it's a much bigger ticket size that a consumer is spending on. And also the whole trioca of finance and insurance and service. A consumer needs to be assured that you will get good finance options, you will get good insurance options, something that he might not get sitting at home. So do you think the awareness from the banking institutions and insurance community is now growing? And is there any problem now that consumers might face as far as insurance and finance is concerned for EVs?
So Sumant, the way we see it is, our dealer partners are an important and will remain an integral part of the entire ecosystem of the entire ecosystem. And having said so, like Naveen also mentioned, that as we move towards and start looking at a hybrid model, whether it is only a showroom approach, a brick and mortar approach, or where dealer partners play a role in setting up experience centers, like, because these are high value purchases, and there's always a need to look at drive the car and experience the car, and especially in an EV experience, the thrill of the EV as well. So dealer partners play that role. Having said so, the dealers also will have to evolve in this new era. Dr. Shetty just talked about that, the revenue sources from the service center, etc., will have to be relooked at as to what the structure would be. But I would also say that we should not look at EVs in isolation. Overall, bringing in EVs also brings in new technologies, which means that there is also an era of 5G and software as a service starts to blend in. So when we look at the role of the dealer partner, and as well as the overall avenues, for revenue, which you alluded to earlier, this all is being studied globally as well, and we are also studying this as we speak. How does a dealer look at revenue sources, whether it is in terms of extending, providing charging support, charging infrastructure, within his community level, and that is where he can look at revenue sources. Likewise, looking at asset management services, leasing options, which will start coming in with EVs, software services will come in. So I think dealer partners and the whole dealer business model will also have to be looked at in terms of how this will evolve over time. Again, key point is EVs don't come in isolation. EVs will also be riding on a lot of technology coming in. 5G, of course, will take some time, but even otherwise, and eventually, of course, one will look at, and I'm jumping 3 to 5 years, for example, we're looking at, CV2X, which basically means a cellular vehicle to everything, connecting to everything, and all those things will evolve. So that will be a very, very new area to start working on. So dealer options, the dealer facilities, the dealer support systems for servicing, the dealer support system for experience centers, or that will continue to play some role, and it will be an important part of the overall ecosystem. In terms of finance and insurance, like you mentioned, I think here I'd like to say that insurance sector will have to study a little more in the case of EVs. What I'm given to understand is that overall, from a policy perspective also, this whole area is being studied. Whether when you look at a traditional approach of an ICE engine, the insurance policies go by the so-called engine size. Whereas when you come to electric vehicles, there is a battery power, and then there is a power of the car itself, because of the entire dynamics of the motor, etc. And I think right now we don't have that. That is still evolving in our country in terms of what kind of slabs of insurance will come into picture. in this entire space. I think that area needs to get evolved a bit faster, and work already is in progress there. In terms of finance, definitely with the help of dealer partners, like I mentioned earlier, whether there's a localized leasing option available, and as well as this whole area, because we keep saying that the acquisition price is very high for an EV. So what should we all be doing to make it easy? While cost of ownership definitely is more attractive, 1/6, like you had mentioned earlier, and that is the right maths. But still, there is an acquisition so-called hurdle, sometimes for the consumers. How do all of us play a role to come over that hurdle? That is where financing industry, dealer partners, OEMs, all of us come together to work around that. Whether it's an asset management services for the battery, or there is a rental for the battery, which is separate, that area will evolve. And that's where, again, the dealer partner will play a very critical role there also. So I think overall, Sumant, to say that, dealers will have it's very important to say dealers will keep on playing a very integral role in the entire ecosystem. The role and responsibilities will evolve compared to what we have been used to traditionally in the past.
So the finance options that you get for, say, a petrol or a diesel Hector versus what you get for MG ZS, is it different? Are banks charging a higher rate of interest for an electric vehicle? And similarly, is insurance higher for electric vehicles vis-a-vis?
So as of now, no. In fact, Sumant, I would say, in fact, banking sector is actually supporting the adoption of EVs, and there are preferred rate structures for EVs as well as we speak. And likewise for the insurance. So right now there is no, you could say, anything which is alarming or different from an ICE structure. But this needs more evolution as we speak to go further.
Right. Dr. Shetty, you mentioned that the whole aspect of service that brings in such a huge revenue, spare parts and service for dealers. Its traditional wisdom says that ICE vehicle dealers, they make less money from outright sale of vehicles. They make more money out of servicing vehicles and by spare parts. Now that will be entirely different in EVs because they will not need service, as you mentioned. They will not also need as many spare parts. But at the same time, probably there will be newer avenues that might open up, be it by way of batteries. Maybe an EV will require replacement of a battery in 7 to 8 years' time, and that battery will cost a lot. So that could be one major chunk, a major spare part, if you call it, which will come into your fiefdom. That any vehicle that you're selling, 8 years down the line, it may need a replacement of a battery, which will cost probably 40% of the cost of the whole vehicle itself. So are these newer avenues that dealers are looking at? And are you also probably looking at fast charging as one revenue model or swapping as another revenue model?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Sumant. There will be new opportunities for dealers in battery leasing and swapping and franchising. Okay. In the recent budget also, the finance minister spoke about this. Especially in three-wheelers, battery swapping could become a reality, and then it could bring down the cost of the vehicle tremendously in three-wheeler cargo carriers as well as passenger car carriers, because the battery can be anywhere between 40 to 45% of the cost of the vehicle. So battery swapping, battery franchising, battery change, would be a big business. Second business that I see is accessories today. A lot of these people would require accessories. A lot of manufacturers probably would work on this and come back to dealers on this. Third one is leasing, especially for four-wheelers. For passenger vehicles, a dealer could become a fleet operator going in future. This has happened in Europe and in the American markets. As far as commercial vehicles are concerned, what is going to happen is it will all be an OPEX model. There will be no CAPEX model by the state road transport corporations, etc., because they're anyway bleeding. And I think the government's policy is make sure that an agency buys it and leases it out per kilometer to the state road transport corporations. So that would be the model which I think all the state road transport corporations would follow. So there will be, like Gauravji said and Naveenji said, there will be a lot newer opportunities coming. Software as a service, battery as a service, sale of accessories, insurance and finance. Okay, that would continue. Okay, maybe lesser amount of money, but it will be, you will see leaner and meaner models of dealerships. Dealership size would come down, because you have a hybrid model of both online and offline. Okay, and the way you sell vehicles would also change. But I feel that dealer is a one-stop point, okay, for selling, for giving you the experience of the vehicle, and also for buying your used vehicle back, and for delivering a new vehicle.
Right, very
I'll
interesting.
just jump in, Sumant, if you don't
Yes,
mind,
yes,
to add to
sure,
what Dr.
please.
Shetty is saying. I think I'll just add here that when we talk of accessories in the future, we have to also start looking at, assume that the way when you buy a mobile, you choose what apps you want.
Correct.
So one is the physical accessorization of the vehicle, because EVs, because of the entire contours and the design, allows you to be much more flexible for accessorization on the physical body. By the same time, a lot of choice will be there for consumers from an app store perspective also. And the young generation who is moving to EV, or who is driving the families to get to EV, they are looking at an entire set of physical accessorization, as well as what software features they want on the cars, or two-wheelers eventually as well, from a choice perspective. So that again is an opportunity where dealer partners will play a role, and so will OEMs. And I'll just add to what we talked about leasing. I think I will throw a spin there that it will become more of subscription as we move along, because leasing sometimes, in our country, it does have a lot of exit costs. But the way the whole industry is evolving, it is still very nascent. We have dabbled with subscription in the last 2.5 years since the start of the Hector as well. Adoption is gradually increasing, but we see subscription really being a big factor for faster adoption of EVs as well. And that is where, like Dr. Shetty talked about, dealers start to play a role also in the local community area, wherein,
Right.
you have a tripartite agreement, OEM, dealer partner, consumer, and that is how this whole space will evolve to give consumers choice. It'll give flexibility. And at the same time, it really allows the overall development of EV adoption faster.
Very interesting, because he's mentioned EV dealer as a fleet operator, and you're saying EV dealer as a leasing agent or a subscription agent. So these are new areas that are opening up new opportunities for dealers. You're not just restricted to inventory management or labor or spare parts and all of that. Now you are actually getting into the service aspect, the actual deliverables for a vehicle. So which is very interesting. Mr. Munjal, if you can throw light on how your dealers have evolved, and is there a different kind of training required because some of the dealer franchisees must be regular brick and mortar ICE vehicle dealers, and they have come to your fold. Is it a different mindset that is required to be selling and servicing EVs, and different kind of training, different kind of maybe philosophy that is required, and where you help them?
Definitely, Sumant. There's a substantial amount of difference, and this is not just the dealers. It's also to do with our own employees, people who are joining the company. It's also to do with the supply chain as we are getting it. So first, you have to unlearn what you've learned, what you've been doing all your life, and then relearn what electric is. And in a lot of cases, it's highly entrepreneurial as well. So you have to go beyond what is already there in the market. So to give you a perspective, when you talk about IC engine vehicle, and specifically, when I'm talking about any form of vehicle, people have used, tried, felt, ridden in one, owned it in their family in this thing. In electric, the chances are that, it's a very small percentage of people. If the penetration is only 1.5–2%, the very small percentage of people who've actually tried out an electric vehicle, they may have heard about it. So the first and foremost is when a customer walks in an IC, the basic difference is, the size of the dealerships are different. The layout of the dealership is very dramatically different. In the IC engine, there's a large part that goes into service element. In electric, there's a very, very small part that goes into electric. The number of people that you find, the number of vehicles you find, it's a different experience altogether. Another factor is when the customer walks in, you don't have to educate him on the benefits of IC or the differences of an IC engine. The guy already knows about it. He's already done his research. In this case, even though he may have done his research when he comes in, it's a very well-informed customer in a lot of cases. still the amount of time that is taken to actually explain the nuances of an electric vehicle to him and the benefits of that is immense. In a lot of cases, when we were doing our own research, the dealer spent half an hour to 45 minutes just explaining about the TCO concept, about the benefits of electric, about the environmental friendly. And there are questions that come by, about battery portability, battery recycling, about the environmental impacts, etc., are huge. So here you have to retrain the dealers in what to really teach the customer, what to really talk to the customer. How do you educate them and getting him to try it out? Getting the person to try out the vehicle is the best form. No vibration, no noise. The experience that you get, the torque that you get from an electric vehicle is substantially different from an IC. And every person who's ridden an electric vehicle has come back thrilled with the experience of it. And so that is where you have to actually do a lot more physical interaction with the customer. You have to do a lot more explanation to the customer than you do in any other forms of vehicles. And as I was saying earlier, here you have to actually take him through the whole journey. You have to, and certainly not overcommit. When it comes to the life of the battery, it comes to the performance of the vehicle, etc. Undercommit, but let the guy have a outstanding experience after that. And that's why we've got 30 to 35% of our customers are repeat customers who've already bought the vehicle and they're buying it for their family, their friends, etc. because of the whole experience. Another important factor that comes in, is when they come in depends on different parts of India, behaves in a different manner. In some cases, it's pure economics. In some cases, it's a convenience of having an electric vehicle where you can actually take out the battery, charge it at home, plug it back into the vehicle, even if you don't have a charging infrastructure in your vicinity, and off you go. And in a lot of cases, it's also the environmental. So initial purchase price could be different for different people, different classes of people, different segments in different parts of the country. More often than not, once they've bought the vehicle, and when we start talking to them about the benefits of the vehicle, majority of the people gravitate towards the environmental impact more so. And this is, I'm talking even rural, when I talk to people who bought an electric vehicle in the rural markets also, and majority of the cases they come back and saying, it is convenient, it's easy to use, it's a great experience, but I'm also doing my bit for the environment. That may not have been the initial purchase decision or the driver for a lot of these people, but eventually it goes into that direction simply because you realize that in all of this you're saving money, but you're also helping the environment. So it's a lot of work that the dealer plays a very important role, and that is where our PGOs, as I was talking about the roadside mechanics, they are also spokespeople for the environmental electric vehicles. And in a lot of these cases, whether it's the PGOs or the infrastructure that we're creating for charging, that is open to even competition. We want that ecosystem. We want more and more vehicles, even competition vehicles, to come to that roadside mechanic for servicing. As his revenue increases, the next neighbor is going to want to get trained, and the next guy. And that is how that ecosystem is going to get created for electric mobility.
Right. I think the one big advantage with electric vehicles is that once you experience it, or once you have it in your garage, I don't think you are going back to a petrol or a diesel vehicle ever. As somebody who has the privilege of driving all sorts of vehicles, I saw that the first time I drove an electric vehicle, I thought that I'm not going to like the petrol or a diesel vehicle. So it's just a matter of how consumers, when do you get that first access to that electric vehicle? Even if it is over your budget, probably it will plant that seed in your head that, oh, the next vehicle has to be electric because it is so much more fun. It is not just good for the environment and good for your pocket. It is also a lot more fun. Gaurav, I'll come to you and the same question, that the training that is required from the OEM to the dealer, how different it is for an electric vehicle, also from a service perspective to the technicians. How different is it? Is it more complex? Is it easier? Or is it just a little more different?
So, I'll just take a different spin before I address the question about the training part, which is within our own ecosystem. I think the space of EV is so new and evolving that overall, as a country also, we have to do our bit to build the ecosystem. So, for example, even in our education institutes, in our engineering institutes, we still have to work a lot more in the R&D to develop the courses for EVs and develop the whole, R&D to a higher level. And that is where, at least at NG, we've partnered with IIT Delhi, to really work on EV courses, because it's very important to build it at the education level itself, because that is when we will start seeing new areas evolving, new technologies coming in, and frankly, that is where we'll see a lot of startups also bringing in some new era of technology and services. The second part is the whole approach about not only training the dealer community, but the overall vocational skills training for the EV industry. And that also is very, very important, because we need people, we need feet on the street who are going to be so-called EV savvy, EV ready to support the requirement. So we've done a little bit in that area. When I say a little bit, we've been working with ASDC to really work on, vocational training initiatives to build up a team on the ground to be general EV ready to support the infrastructure overall, to support the industry overall. And lastly is, of course, the component development industry. So we are working with ACMA also for the EV perspective. And why I said I think this is important is because one is to train our own people, but the overall important is to train the entire ecosystem, education institutes, vocational, and then component development. So if all these three pillars are taken care of, then you look at what you have within your own family as such. So employees, dealer partners, and I would say even consumers training as well, because the whole approach is, you come with a mindset sometimes. That's how I've seen my parents drive a car, and that's how I've seen it being used, right? But how is the EV experience different? What more you can do, how much flexibility it allows you. You don't have to go to a gas station or a petrol pump. So the whole concept of freedom, the whole concept of as you choose, you can charge your vehicle depending on your requirement. That entire mindset of flexibility and freedom is a very key factor in our education and talking with consumers when we engage with them, whether it's online or whether it's in the showroom as well. In terms of training, I would say that the whole approach of EV training is actually more interesting than ICE, because you are able to, one is you have less number of moving pieces. That is number one. Number two, the whole concept now is about how you do a plug and play approach. So the young generation, and we have seen that the young members in our dealerships, be it on the sales side, on the service side as well, they are much faster in adapting and grasping this technology. I'm not saying that the others are not, but I'm saying they're much faster than relatively speaking. So that is one key difference we are seeing. Second, a lot of modular programs are very helpful with them. So which means that, the devices like your mobile are very handy to be able to train people now on EVs, because there is less moving pieces, like I said earlier. At the same time, it's much faster to train also overall. So that is part which is very, very important. And frankly, it's very exciting for everybody. So we are seeing much, much higher levels of concentration, because the module size, the program size is in small bites. And that becomes very amenable, especially in this hybrid culture where you sometimes have to struggle with long duration of focus for people. Short bite programs become very, very important. The whole part about an EV at the end of the day is the thrill of driving it, because, the way the whole vehicle performs, the 0 to 100 level of delivery, the silence, I think eventually that seals the entire program very well when you learn about it and you experience it. And then, like we've talked about, whether it's environment or insure or the cost of ownership, that works out very well. So training, in fact, I would say is more interesting. It is different, but not alarming, or do we say it's a showstopper? In fact, it is more welcoming by the entire ecosystem.
Whenever you talk about driving and EVs, it automatically brings a smile to my face. I'm eagerly waiting for the new ZS EV and also your smaller EV that you have promised will be coming soon. So I will hold you for that. Lastly, let me come to Dr. Shetty. This is an era of transition for everybody, and also it will be for dealers. Who better to give us the last word on how the dealer community should look at this? Because over the next 10 years, 15 years, there will be a case where older dealerships, the ICE vehicle dealerships, need to shut down, and newer EV-only dealerships need to open up. So it will be any transition brings some pain, but it also opens up doors of opportunity. The ones who are more adaptive and flexible to this new reality will probably do better. What will be your message, and how are you looking at this transition, given that you understand the psyche of a dealer better than anybody here?
Sumant, the change is inevitable, okay? And it's coming at a very, very rapid pace. So we got to embrace it, accept it, and move on in life. Okay. So I think you will see the point of inflection in two-wheelers or three-wheelers change very, very fast when the larger players come in, like Suzuki, Honda, Bajaj. When these guys jump into it, there will be a huge change. So we are at the cusp of that change. So I think dealers who adopt to these changes, who accept these realities, will survive. But there are a lot of other business opportunities that come up with. You can have charging stations in your stockyards. You can have charging stations in your, in your service centers, at your dealership, at local apartment places, etc. So creating the charging infrastructure would be one huge business that the dealer community can have. Second is battery as a service, accessories as a service, software services, like what Gauravji said. Those would bring in a string of revenues to you. Third is the subscription model, be it a car, be it a two-wheeler, be it a three-wheeler. That would become a reality, like what Gauravji was saying. So all these, the business model, the dealer will be there, but the business model will change. It's for us to embrace the change and adopt to the newer ways of doing business.
Right, absolutely. And I think it is so software heavy. Any electric vehicle is so software heavy that in a way it is also counterintuitive and helpful for any dealer, because a roadside mechanic may not be able to fix it because he will need a lot of sophisticated equipment which will only be with the dealer. So that ways it also insures you a bit if you are invested in this side of the business. And like you said, the newer avenues that open up, because the petrol pumps will become redundant. And that is an opportunity for automotive industry to jump in. It's a huge, big industry waiting to be tapped, and dealers could be the ambassadors of that. So it's been fascinating. We are running out of time as always, but it's so fascinating to talk about electric vehicles and the possibilities that it brings about. We will keep tracking it on a regular basis. But thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us today. It was absolutely fascinating from my end. Hope you have a great day ahead, and thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shyam.
Thank you. Pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.